gentlemen, it is Thursday, which means we are going to do wide receiver, tight end, and defense rankings. In this video, we're going to look over the top 36 options for you at wide receiver, your ones, your wide receiver twos, and your flex options. We're doing this in half PPR. If you have any questions or comments, please drop those down below. If you are new or if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, enables me to do what I love so I can keep bringing you the content that you love. But enough of that, without any further ado, let's get into this week's wide receiver rankings. The top spot goes to Davante Adams. He gets the Bears on the road. Last week, Adams put up a ridiculous 206 yards, hitting his career high against the Bengals. He's averaging 115 yards and 15 targets per game in his last 3. Our second-ranked player is Tyreek Hill, going against the Washington football team. Last week, Buffalo made a concerted effort to slow him down, and they were successful, although Hill did have 13 targets. He is going to crush Washington in an awesome matchup. The only thing we need to be careful of is that he did not practice either yesterday on Wednesday or today, and so we have to keep an eye closely to make sure that he does suit up. Same game, other side of the coin. At 3, it's Scary Terry McLaurin. He's been more boom or bust type of a player so far than we would like thus far this season. However, I think it's going to be the former in a week where he gets a Kansas City defense just trying to keep the football team under 30. Next, at 4, it's Cooper Kupp, and he comes in averaging 11 targets a game. The Giants matchup here does not scare us. After playing nice in his last 2 games, he's due. James Bradbury certainly looms, but Kupp will be able to hold his own. Rounding out the top 5 is Stephon Diggs. He gets Tennessee. It's very clear so far that teams have been keying on Diggs, trying to make his life miserable, but he is too talented to be held in check for much longer, especially getting this matchup as the Titans give up the most points per game to wideouts. Justin Jefferson is next at number 6. He gets a tough matchup in the Carolina Panthers. However, at this point, Jefferson looks unguardable. He racked over 100 yards last week in the first half alone. In next at 7 is DJ Moore against those Vikings. Now, the only thing that we're concerned about for Moore is the potential return of CMC taking up some of those targets. Right now, CMC is actually trending to not play. So either way for me, even if CMC does, he's going to rebound. He will be a solid option. Next up at 8 is Jamar Chase against the Lions. So far this season, Jamar Chase has been the truth. He has 456 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season as the current wide receiver 7. Even in a tough matchup against a top 10 passing defense, we are not afraid of it. He is a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. In at 9 is DeAndre Hopkins, and he gets a Cleveland team that just got lit up for 398 yards and 4 touchdowns by Justin Herbert. This is the week that Nuke comes in with a strong wide receiver 1 finish. You can book it. Rounding out the top 10 and clearly back where he belongs is Mike Williams. If Carson Wentz can throw for 400 yards on you, you're not doing it right. So this matchup with Baltimore is one that we love. Williams right now leads the league in touchdowns and is top 5 in overall yardage. He is the current wide receiver 1. His teammate Keenan Allen slides in next at 11. And for me, this feels like the game where Allen takes back the reins a little bit and gets out of his wide receiver 2 production funk. Either way, he's playing well, and he's got 32 targets in his last 3 games. Our final spot and making his first appearance as a wide receiver 1 is Deontay Johnson, the lucky winner of who gets to play the Seahawks this week. With Juju Smith-Schuster out, more targets are certainly coming for Johnson, and prior to his bizarre 2-target output last week, he was averaging nearly 12 a game. That sounds about right here, and he is going to explode. CeeDee Lamb is next. He goes on the road to face the Patriots in Foxborough, and he is our lucky number 13. I'm not really sure what to make of an elite passing defense that just allowed Davis Mills to throw for 300 yards, but since Lamb was able to hit last week. I suppose the ranking here fits. Chris Godwin is in at 14 for us, and he plays Thursday night on the road against Philly. He has the best corner matchup of all the receivers for Tampa Bay, and after scoring in his first 3, he's gone back-to-back without reaching pay dirt. I think this is the week to change that. His teammate, Mike Evans, is next at 15, and Evans comes in after finishing the wide receiver 5 last week behind 113 yards and a pair of scores. He's going to continue to hog red zone targets as long as Gronk is out, and he's averaging 10 targets per game in his last 3. At 16 for us is DK Metcalf, who finds himself falling pretty significantly due to the uncertainty with Geno Smith at the helm. This is a great matchup against a bottom 3 defense, so fire him up and hope that fourth quarter Geno is the one on the field. Up next, at 17 is Chase Claypool. We love the matchup with Seattle, and we love the way that he bounced back coming from that hamstring injury to get out for 130 yards and a tutty last week. The Hawks are certainly not going to slow him. Amari Cooper is next at 18 against those Patriots. Now, he has touchdowns in back-to-back games, but just 13 targets in the last 3 weeks, so there's certainly risk. However, he's been able to produce on little so far this season. A.J. Brown has certainly struggled so far this season and finds himself down at 19 because he has to face the Buffalo Bills secondary, and he may be shadow covered by Tre'Davious White. We have to temper expectations in this game and hope for a busted coverage. Skyrocketing to the top 20 is Antonio Brown, and in 4 games so far this season, Brown has 3 touchdowns, 325 yards, and 29 targets. He is not a wide receiver 3. He is the wide receiver 1C behind Evans and Godwin, and he is ranked as such. Up next at 21 is Robert Woods against the Giants, and the squeaky wheel got his opportunities last week, catching 12 out of 14 targets for 150 yards. New York is allowing 36 points a game to wideouts, so I like his chance at an encore this week. At 22, it's Devonta Smith who gets the Tampa Bay Bucks. Smith has just started to come into his own and heat up, and over the last 2 weeks, he has 14 catches for 199 yards. He is likely to get in the end zone again this week after he hasn't been there since week 1. Moving on to 23, we have Marquise Brown against the Chargers. Now, this may seem low for the current wide receiver 6. However, the Chargers have allowed the second fewest points to wide receivers thus far. In his last 2 games, Brown has 3 touchdowns and 214 yards. Our final wide receiver 2 comes with Brandon Cooks at 24 against Indianapolis. And after back-to-back brutal matchup weeks, Cooks gets a gift in Indy, who's allowing 41 points a game to wide receivers and has surrendered 10 touchdowns already on the season. It is his time to get back on track. The last player in our top 25 is Adam Thielen on the road against the Panthers. Thielen has struggled lately, not going over 50 yards since week 1, and he hasn't scored since week 3. After just 3 targets last week, this feels like a game where Cousins is going to get him more involved. At 26, it is Tyler Lockett against Pittsburgh, and over the last 3 weeks, Lockett has struggled. He has 19 targets, and he's turned that into 112 yards. That was with 11 quarters of Russell Wilson. He's gonna boom with Geno eventually, right? Next up is Emmanuel Sanders. He slides into 27, and he's been on fire in his last 3 weeks. He's the current wide receiver 17, and he's had 4 touchdowns and 222 yards in those last 3 games. He's become a favorite target of Josh Allen, and the Titans are no match for him here. We have Michael Pittman at number 28, and he gets the Houston Texans. Now, Pittman has 4 straight finishes in the top 40, and 2 of those were top 15 finishes, so he's been solid. The Texans, however, are tied for the 2nd fewest passing touchdowns allowed and the 7th fewest points to wideouts. At 29, it's T. Higgins against the Lions, and although he had a quiet return from injury, he was still 2nd in the team in targets. I think as teams start keying in more on Jamar Chase, production for him will follow, and then that starts this week. Up at 30, it is Courtland Sutton against the Raiders. This is a very tough matchup with the possibility of Casey Hayward Jr. shadowing him. after a big week where he caught 7 of 11 targets for 120 yards, an encore seems unlikely. We move to 31 and Jacoby Myers gets a Cowboys team that is giving up 43 points a game, and Myers is the clear wide receiver 1 in New England. He's going to be more involved after just 5 passes thrown his way last week. I like the opportunity. Our 32nd player is Jalen Waddle. He gets Jacksonville. Waddle comes in averaging 7 targets a game, and the wide receiver room in Miami is all banged up, so there's going to be opportunity to produce against a decent Jags defense. We comboed here at 33 and put both Marvin Jones Jr. and Laviska Shenault against Miami. The Dolphins are allowing the 5th most points per game to wide receivers, so the dice roll here is warranted. Now, Shenault had more yards in his 1 catch last week than Jones did in his last 2 games combined, so I am going with him as the preference. Next up for us at 34 is Allen Robinson against Green Bay. And honestly, he doesn't really deserve to be here. He has done nothing so far this season, but we are hoping that Justin Fields is able to put his talents on display. Tyler Boyd gets Detroit and is in at number 35. He has 16 targets and 142 yards in his last 2 games. Joe Burrow is playing really well, and I expect a lot of points to be scored against the Lions. Our final player at 36 is Kadarius Toney against the Rams. He was the pickup of the week after exploding for 189 yards, and he has 267 in his last 2. He is potentially one of the only healthy pass catchers in New York and should be able to produce. A couple notable omissions before we send you on your way. Odell Beckham has 10 targets and 47 yards in his last 2 games. I will pass. Tim Patrick against Vegas has a tough matchup, and I expect the Broncos to run the ball a ton. And finally, Rondale Moore against the Browns. Now, he got his turn last week. I think it's going to be someone else this week against Cleveland. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any start-sit questions, please drop those down below. This is Relentless Press, and I am your host, Abraham Opatz.